Good morning. I'm Andrew Bloch, and welcome to Ask the Expert, an award-winning daily series that runs from 8:30 to 9 to help small businesses. If you've got any questions, you can ask them in the comments of the live feed, and if you need any more advice, you can join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. During the live session, we're going to be running a poll, so please engage with it, and at the end, I will reveal the answers. So, I'm Andrew Bloch, and I have a background in PR, which is pretty useful, considering this session is all about asking anything on PR. I started my career in PR about 25 years ago at an agency called Lynn Franks, very famous as being the inspiration for Absolutely Fabulous. It was a pretty crazy place to work. And I spent 5 years there before setting up my own agency, Frank, which is actually 21 years old today, which seems quite unbelievable. The agency grew from just a couple of us into one of the most successful consumer PR agencies in the UK, and very, very famous for lots of campaigns. If you've ever played Call of Duty, if you've ever bought a Meerkat toy or received one with your car insurance, if you've ever seen baked beans with Weetabix, all of those are Frank accounts. I stepped back from Frank about a year ago to move into a non-executive director position, which basically means I don't get involved in the day-to-day side of PR anymore, but I do oversee the agency from a director's point of view, and it's allowed me to go off and do my own thing, really. So now I run my own boutique consultancy and I advise PR agencies on how they can grow and develop, market themselves. I help brands develop their PR and their marketing. I still have a few different accounts that I look after. I have been the spokesperson and PR consultant to Lord Sugar for the last 20 or so years, which is always interesting. Getting involved in the winners of The Apprentice, helping them to develop their businesses, as well as other investments he makes, which are pretty frequent. Last week or 2 weeks ago, he invested in a 19-year-old who set up a jewelry business on TikTok. A couple of months before that, another Instagram-based business that produces labels that you put on home products to help keep things tidy and play into that whole trend for tidying your house. I get involved and help out with good causes. Most recently, I've been working on a campaign for St Paul's Cathedral to help build a memorial for people that have passed during COVID, and we raised close to £3 million so far in order to build this memorial. And in addition to that, I help out with the Prince's Trust, where I sit on their business launch group panel. I work for a record label called Big Community Records, which is run by the COO of Google, which is all about helping young Black people get into the music industry. I am a mentor for the School of Marketing, School of Communication Arts. So I'm keeping myself busy. In terms of the PR world, it's changed sort of immeasurably, really, from when I started out 25 years ago, but the principles are still the same. And PR is a really, really hard thing to explain because it's so diverse and covers so many different areas. Actually, just in preparation for this, I wrote down a quote, which I Googled just to see how it was explained by the PRCA, which is the governing body for the PR industry. They talk about PR as being managing and disseminating information from an individual or organization to the public in order to affect public perception. So if you sort of break that down, what does it mean? It's effectively trying to make a difference in terms of people's opinions to a person, to a business, to an organization. For me, PR has always needed to go much further. And I would define good PR as PR that creates a reaction. There is no point just doing PR for the sake of PR. There has to be a reaction at the end of it. Now, that reaction could be changing someone's perception, could be driving sales, could be increasing awareness. There's all sorts of reactions that you can you can try and create. At Frank, we called it talkability. And we define talkability as the buzz that takes over and does your best marketing for you. And whereas maybe 20 years ago, PR was predominantly seen as media relations and the bit that sort of acted as a go-between between the brand and the media, now it goes much, much further. And technology is really the main thing that's changed that. The onset of social media has meant that brands and individuals can speak directly with their audience. It's easier and easier to reach huge, huge audiences, but much harder to get attention. And as consumers, as business people, we all know that we're bombarded by messages day in, day out. And what we do is we filter out those messages. We don't even pay attention to them. So actually the key is to cut through. And the way that we would start trying to think of campaign ideas for organizations was very much idea first. So rather than thinking about we want to create an event or how can we go viral on Twitter or whatever it might be, come up with a creative concept in the middle. And then from that, work out the best channel to reach your audience. So yes, one channel could be the media, but equally, you can generate a reaction, create buzz by sponsorship, by advertising, via social media, by creating events, all sorts of different ways to do it. And in terms of kind of trying to brainstorm ideas of how we would come up with these ideas, we'd look at various different triggers. So we'd look at imagery and the use of imagery and how to create a powerful image that would be memorable. We'd look at perceptions. What are the current perceptions of a brand, a product, a service, and how can we change those perceptions? How can we alter them? How can we twist them so that they grab attention? We'd look at the conventions of how things are typically done within a set industry. And sometimes it's about changing that and looking for other industries and other areas to borrow from. So if you're a retailer, don't necessarily look at the traditional way that a retailer would PR themselves, maybe take inspiration from an automotive company, a soft drinks company, a beauty company, and twist things that way. And we'd look at the zeitgeist and what was going on in the world. So the key to this really is not looking at what's going on now at this exact moment, but trying to predict how people are going to be feeling, what's going to be going on, what the zeitgeist is going to be in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year, and tapping into that. And by playing around with those different triggers, we'd come up with a concept that would create talkability, and then we'd find the best channels to push out that message and get it seen by as many people as possible. And that really is the key. PR has to be measurable. It has to make a difference. So one of the other things that has really changed in the last, 10 years or so, especially, is the ability to measure the impact of PR. So now we're able to measure not just the awareness, not just the buzz that's created and the opportunity for messages to be talked about, but also the direct impact on a business. And clever and well thought through measurement of a campaign can actually look at the direct impact of what you're doing and how that relates to new sales, to sign-ups, etc., etc. And the better you can measure the impact of what you're doing, the more likely you are to be able to increase your PR and do more and more if you can show a return on investment. So it's a really, really exciting time to be in PR. And I'm going to shut up now and try and answer some questions, because I think what I want to try and do really today is just be as useful as possible in terms of answering any questions that you may have. So I've got some questions that have started to come in already. I haven't read these, so I have no idea what they're going to say. Hopefully I'll be able to answer them. And yeah, please keep questions coming in, and I will start to answer the ones that I've received already. So the first question is from Gabriella. It's on Instagram. If you're entering a market that has a lot of competition, how do you make your product and business stand out or be better than the rest? I think, look, it's quite likely that what you're doing is not going to be completely unique. There's always going to be competition. You have to find your unique selling point, the thing that makes you different, the thing that makes you better. It could be related to your product, it could be related to your customer service. I think sometimes when people are running a brand or working for a business, they have so much information, they want to say everything. And one of the key mistakes that people make is trying to do that. And if you try and say too much, the key thing that you want to say often gets lost. So what I would encourage you to do is to find that one or two unique things that you want to be perceived as being different from your competitive set, and then really, really focus on that. Don't worry about the secondary, the tertiary messages. Just really focus on that key thing that you want to be known for, that you want to be perceived for, and hammer that home as much as you possibly can. Second question from Malik via Twitter on direct message. You've worked across a lot of campaigns over the years. Do you have any favourites? What do you think made it successful? It's a really hard question. It's a question that I get asked a lot, and a question I've never really found an answer for, because I think when you work in PR, I guess like other industries, you throw everything into what you're doing. And really, your favourite campaign is normally the last thing that you worked on, and you're kind of then on to the next thing. I mean, there has been some key moments in my career that have stood out and been very, very memorable. I touched on a couple of them in my intro. I think the work that we did for Compare the Meerkat was right up there as my favourite. And it was successful, I think, not just from a creative perspective, but it actually solved a business problem. And that business problem, I won't go into too much detail, but was about search. And it was about how people search for insurance, the search terms, if you were buying PPC, extremely expensive. And by creating a character around a meerkat, first of all, really differentiated Compare the Market. But second of all, it meant that people were going into search and directly typing for meerkat as opposed to cheap car insurance, which saved the business a huge amount of money. And that was really the success of that campaign. And it's now, I don't know, 10, 12 years old, and it's still as popular as it's ever been. So that will always stand up there. I think the work that we did in the computer game industry was a fantastic place to be, especially at the time, and having done sort of major launches for computer games like Call of Duty or FIFA, and helping to make the entertainment industry recognize the fact that gaming was not just young boys in their bedroom, it was something that was a real mass market, and getting games and launches of games talked about in mainstream media was really game-changing at the time. So that will always stand up. There's some really memorable things. And then, plenty of others, probably too many to mention, to be honest. James on Instagram. Good morning. Good morning, James. My business has a good legacy brand, but I think it's limiting our reach with new customers. How do I come up with an out-of-the-box idea to reach them and not upset our regulars? It's a really good question. And it's something that a lot of brands face. When you have a legacy brand, what that brings with it is trust. And having been around, having built a reputation over a number of years, having heritage, being able to play into, I guess, people's fond memories of a brand or a business is really, really important, and a real strength. So lots of brands use that legacy as a way to continue to build the brand. What's really important is to move it forward. And if you have an audience that is aging, or you're not sort of reaching new potential customers, you need to find a way to modernize. And the key to that is to play on your legacy, to play on your heritage, but add a modern twist. And there's lots of brands, if you think about brands like Brylcreem, like Old Spice, I don't know what industry you're in. These are brands that have been around for years and years, but have found a way to become relevant and to modernize, but without alienating their previous audience. And some of the most successful brands, the sort of Coca-Colas, the Weetabix of this world, have this incredible legacy, yet they've been able to move with the times and stay modern. And I think if you do that successfully, you're not going to upset your regular customers. Actually, hopefully the perception that they're going to have is that feeling that they were there right at the beginning, and they'll be excited that they're part of something which is moving forward and increasing in popularity with a new generation and a new sort of range of customers. Carmen on Facebook Messenger. I run a B2B tech recruitment solutions business, and our main way to drum up business is through business development leads, client recommendations, and procurement pitches. Outside of this, what comms activity should we be considering, and how would it help? It's a common challenge that lots of B2B businesses face. I actually sit on the board of a tech recruitment business myself, so I understand this area pretty well. The way I would look at it is there's two ways to sort of drum up business. One is by proactively going out, like you say, and developing new leads, focusing on client recommendations and organic growth through that, getting involved in pitches. The other way is building your profile. So it's building your profile so that people are aware of you, and they come to you as opposed to you having to go to them. And when I was sort of running my agency, we were very fortunate to sort of be able to build a brand that people were aware of. You have to make sure people know what you stand for, and this goes back to what I was talking about before. So why would people want to use you? Why are you the best tech recruitment solution out there compared to your competitors? And then you need to market that, and you need to develop a brand and a personality that you can use your own content channels to continually update people on what you're doing, what you can offer, what your services are. And then you can look at B2B and your B2B PR and your relevant media. How can you comment on things that are affecting your industry? How can you get involved in speaker events? Can you enter awards that will give that sort of recognition of credibility? And the combination of sort of pushing yourself out there plus proactively going after the business you want, that's what's always worked for me when working with B2B companies. And really the key is being front of mind. And as you know, if you're selling a tech recruitment solution, it's not going to be something that is front of mind 24/7. It's something that people will think about every 6 months, every year. You need to make sure that when they come to that decision-making process, you're there and you're the one that they think about. So it requires continual effort. And the best way to build your presence on social media is to add value. So you're an expert in this area, share information, help people learn, be useful. No one wants to follow a recruitment solution business that is consistently advertising themselves. So therefore you have to add value to what you're doing, a bit like Intuit are doing with this Ask the Expert series. They're building their business towards small businesses, medium-sized businesses. They're adding value via this Ask the Expert series so that they build a relationship with their customers, they remain front of mind, they differentiate themselves from their competitors. So that's how I think sort of PR and marketing yourself could help you. Alana on Twitter DM. Any tips on the best way to engage with journalists? I often find they either blank me or stories fall through. Ends up being a lot of work for nothing. I mean, this could be a whole topic in its own way. I guess the key to it is relevance. I think any good PR person will consume media via all different sources, and they'll understand it, and they'll understand who writes about what. One of the main reasons that stories fall through is just because they're simply not well targeted in the first place. If you've got a story and you know where it should sit, then there's no reason why, if you've pitched it correctly, that a journalist wouldn't cover it. I think, you build up relationships with journalists over years and years, which can sometimes help them to pick up the phone or at least sort of reply to an email, but actually you're only as good as your story. So you need to really understand, where are the key places to target. You can use technology. So a business I sit on called Propel, which is a media database of millions of journalists. What something like that does is really help you filter through the relevant media and find the right places to go. Another way to do it is to look at people that have written stories similar to the one that you're trying to place. That means really that they're interested in your topic area. And really, it shouldn't be a lot of work, and it certainly shouldn't be for nothing. You know, when I'm pitching a story, I'm not going out to 1,000 people. I'm probably going to half a dozen or so well thought through leads in terms of media outlets. And, you know, I'm getting a 90 to 100% success rate because I know that those journalists cover this area. I know what they've talked about previously. They've probably covered stuff for me before. And therefore, you know, it's not a lot of work for nothing. If you don't do the groundwork up front, then it can be time consuming. Okay, Hasib on Twitter DM. You mentioned Call of Duty. What did you and your agency do for that campaign? And what was the campaign's greatest success? So I won't bore people that aren't into computer games, but Call of Duty is a game that is a very, very popular game. Was growing in terms of its popularity. I worked for Activision, who are the publisher of the game, for many, many years. I think it was Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, which became the biggest entertainment launch in history. And I mentioned previously about the perception of the media was that gaming just wasn't as big as the entertainment industry, the movie industry. They just, even though the numbers were there to support it, they just in their heads couldn't get around the size and the scale of the industry. One of the ways that we overcame that misconception was we did the first ever launch of a computer game in Leicester Square. So Leicester Square, home of movie premieres, home of the red carpet, home of the A-list celebrities. And no computer game had ever done a screening on this scale. We took over Leicester Square. There was soldiers marching around the square. We even brought in sort of real tanks to create a really nice visual image. We replaced the red carpet with a camo carpet. All of the actors who did the voiceovers in the game were there, a bit like a movie premiere where you see the producers, the directors on stage talking about a movie before it screens. We had all of the key people from the game on stage. And then it was a chance to reveal the game and play the game for the first time. So we did, that was a big landmark. It was on BBC News at 10, ITV News at 10. It became the biggest entertainment launch in history. And each year it sort of went on and we had to turn it into different directions. I think the following year we had the biggest simultaneous launch out there. And it was in 26 different countries at one time, launching live, so that was pretty mega. We took over Battersea Power Station. We had soldiers sort of parascending down the chimneys of Battersea Power Station, projection mapping of the game on the front of Battersea Power Station. So going back to what I was talking about, talkability, it was about all these different angles and ways of changing perception, creating strong imagery, tapping into the zeitgeist of what was going on, and not just relying on the core fan base. The game had a massive fan base. This was about expanding it beyond there and really turning it into a mass market event. And one of the best things I've ever worked on. It's a good game as well. Alex on YouTube. Love the meerkats. I've set up in a traditional industry, the wine trade, but I want to reach out to new non-traditional customers. What are the best current channels to customers? YouTube channel, LinkedIn, etc. Quite a difficult question to answer, to be honest. I guess, yes, the wine trade is a very traditional industry. I don't know too much about what you're doing and how you're doing it. If I look at the wine industry, and I'm by no means an expert in this area, I would say that it's pretty traditional, quite stuffy, a little bit snobbish. There probably is an opportunity for a brand to break down some of the stuff that goes on in the industry and normalize it a little bit and increase the audience and broaden it slightly. So, different channels to reach different places. Just because a social media channel is out there doesn't mean you have to use it. Your customers are going to be across all social media platforms. YouTube is a great place for education. It's a great place for search. So where people are looking for, how to find the best red wine, how to find the cheapest champagne, the best value this, the best that, tasting tips, food pairing, wine pairing tips. YouTube's a good place for that, as is Instagram, very, very visual. TikTok is actually at the moment a very underutilized social channel, particularly for business. And there's a lot of businesses that are getting an early advantage by getting onto the platform and just educating in a very easy to consume, straightforward manner. People's attention spans are shorter and shorter. So using platforms like TikTok, like Instagram Reels or Stories, can be a very, very powerful way of marketing, and also building the personalities behind the brand. So I don't know if you're front facing of the brand, Alex, but if you are, using these channels as a way to use yourself as a differentiator, can be a pretty effective way of marketing. Stefan on Twitter DM, currently working with an agency to develop our first brand guidelines. I'm a novice, but I think I know what looks good and bad. Any key things to nail and any watch outs? It's going to depend on what your brand is and what you're trying to do. Simplicity is often the key, I think. Something that's, we all have a personal opinion of what looks good and bad, and that's fine. Depending on what your brand is, just make sure it's not something that is just appealing to you and not necessarily your audience. Sometimes you have to put your own personal opinions to one side and look at the audience that you're trying to reach. For me, it's something that's clean, it's something that stands out, it's something that represents your brand values. Don't be too clever, don't be too intricate. Keep it on trend, but not something that is going to date. A good brand visual identity is something that will stand the test of time. There's lots to nail. There's lots of watch outs. I think a good brand agency will be able to cut through the clutter of all the things that you want to get across and just focus on something that is straightforward, simple, and memorable. But if you like it, then go with your guts. And I think that is all the time we have for questions. That's gone incredibly quickly, for me at least, hopefully for you as well. So I'm going to turn to the poll. And the question that we asked, does your business have a PR strategy? Only 20% of you said yes, which quite surprising for me, really. Maybe the question we should have asked is, do you have any sort of marketing strategy at all? And then I think that number would hopefully increase a little bit. I'd also, maybe you do have a strategy, but you don't realize that you have a strategy. I'm sure you are doing something without actually realizing. And if you don't, you should do, really. Doesn't mean you need to be hiring an expensive agency or a consultant, but you should know what you're trying to communicate, how you're trying to change perception with your audience, your customers, and start to develop a plan to do that, even if it's at a very low level and you're doing it yourself. It is definitely something that you should be considering. So we've pretty much run out of time. So thank you so much for tuning in today. If you've got any further questions for me, you can contact me. You can find me on all of the main social media channels, on Twitter at Andrew Bloch, or go to my website, andrewbloch.co.uk, which has got all my contact details. So tomorrow on Ask the Expert, we've got a great speaker, Ariona Barraculte. She's from Major Accounts, a chartered accountant and a digitalization expert. So tune in tomorrow for business and accounting advice. And just one final reminder that if you need any more advice, you can join the official Intuit QuickBooks SMB community group on Facebook. Accountants and business experts are on hand 24/7. So thank you. That is all from me. I've really enjoyed answering your questions. Hopefully you found it useful, and I will leave you to get on with your days. Thank you very much.